doing today is, oh my goodness, and it is Dr. Chris Roddenberry here coming to you live from Buffalo, New York. My travel plans were thrown up in the air yesterday, so I wound up getting stuck here in Boston. In Buffalo. Hopefully, my internet holds out today. If it doesn't, I'll post a recording. But we're going to try to go ahead and do this lecture today. If you're in the audience, I see we have a few people in the audience. Go ahead and type in the chat bar and let me know that the sound and the video is coming through clear to you. If I could get a quick sound check. Meanwhile, I'm going to take a drink of coffee and see what's going on. Looks like we got Zachary Hubenthal in the audience today. Thank you very much. How's the sound, Zachary? Everything going well? Fantastic. It's good to see you. Thanks a bunch for coming today. I really do appreciate it. All right. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Zach. Let's go ahead and get to the lecture. Today we're talking about Chapter 10, Sex and Gender. Now, we only have 3 days of lecture this week, and so we're only going to cover sex and gender for one day. We'll spend the other 2 days talking about stress and coping, but today we're going to talk about sex and gender. Now, if you will, sex and gender is a huge, huge topic for cultural debate, and it is a place where there is a huge cultural divide here in America concerning the nature of homosexuality. This divide has led to a huge upheaval across political, judicial, and religious spheres of influence in our society. I know you probably heard about them banning books about LGBTQ people. People are arguing about when we should do sexual reassignment interventions. And I'm sure you've probably heard people talking about transgender people and bathroom rights. I am not here today to provide you with any opinions or beliefs about these topics, okay? These are all topics that are very important and very complex and not appropriate for a psychology class. These are the topics that are more better saved for the political sphere, for sociology classes and all that other stuff. I am not here to indoctrinate you one way or the other. So I'm not here for you to walk out of this class saying, Dr. Roddenberry is right. There are only two genders, male and female. Or I don't want you coming out of here talking about how there are biological reasons for heterosexuality or homosexuality. I'm not here to convince you. All I want to do today is sort of just give you some facts as I see them about human sex and gender. And hopefully these facts will arm you as you form your opinions about these very important social topics. Okay? I see Lewis has joined the chat today. Hi, Lewis. How you doing? We're only having one lecture on sex and gender, and that'll be today. And then we're going to switch to chapters, chapter 11. We're going to do 2 days on chapter 11. Okay? So I just want to set the ground rules by telling you, yes, I'm going to be talking about sex and gender, and I'm going to say some things that probably everybody in this room will disagree with. So people on one side of the debate, you're going to be unhappy about what I say. People on the other side of the debate, you're going to be unhappy about what I say. Really, I'm just trying to give you the facts as I know them, and hopefully they help you out. Good morning, Lewis. How you doing? I'm doing well, thanks. My plane, I was supposed to be up in Chautauqua, New York on Sunday, but my plane was held over on Sunday, and I didn't get up to Buffalo yesterday morning. I didn't have a ride, so I missed my ride to Chautauqua, so I'm stuck in Buffalo, New York in a hotel room. And let me tell you, this was an empty town on July 4th. Holy cow, everybody was gone. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, let's talk a little bit. It's probably important to think about sex in two ways. If you hear people debate, you're going to hear some people say, oh, there are only two genders. Either you have a Y chromosome or you don't. And other people are going to say, you know what? Human sexuality is incredibly complex, and there are people who are born with with primary sexual characteristics for both sexes. And you know what? Both of these people on the left and the right are correct in a way. And I believe that the reason these people disagree is because they're talking about sex at the wrong time from the wrong perspective. So I'm going to talk about genetic sex, which is those sexual instructions you're born with. And I'm going to talk about biological sex, which is the fully mature sexuality that you begin to demonstrate after you go through puberty. Okay? Now, let's look at the first question. Are there more than two categories of sex? Genetically speaking, no. You are either male or you are female. Genetically speaking, you have the Y chromosome or you do not have the Y chromosome. Now, really, it's not even the Y chromosome, but it's a very specific place on the Y chromosome called the SRY gene, the sex-determining region of the Y chromosome. This part of the Y chromosome is responsible for initiating the sexual differentiation that will lead to maleness. Developing embryos that possess the SRY gene will begin to transform into males at around the 7th week of gestation. Embryos that do not have the SRY gene will begin to transform into females around the 7th week of prenatal development. Let's talk about this for just a second, okay? So, if you look over on the far side, what you're looking at is some karyotypes. These are basically pictorial representations of people's 46 chromosomes. If you look down at the bottom right of each of these two black squares, you'll see the sex chromosomes in the 23rd pair. The black black square on the top has two X chromosomes in the bottom right-hand corner of that box. Two X chromosomes. X chromosomes are typically associated with the genetic quality of femaleness. So you'll notice that this female has two X chromosomes. This karyotype has two X chromosomes. Since there is no Y chromosome and no SRY gene, the black box in the top is a genetic female. If you look at the black box at the bottom, you'll notice that in the 23rd pair, they have an X and a Y chromosome. The little small Y chromosome is typically called the male gene because this chromosome carries the little SRY gene that will basically turn the developing organism into a male. Now, point of fact, there are in rare occasions that SRY gene can actually migrate to an X chromosome, through the mutation and the translocation that occurs during mitosis and meiosis. But as a general rule, you're going to find this SRY gene on the Y chromosome, which means that if you have the Y chromosome, you're considered a genetic male. Good morning, Juliet. We're talking a little bit about human sexuality, and I'm trying to make the distinction between what we call genetic sex, which is the sex that you're born with, the sex instructions that you're born with in your genes, and I'm going to differentiate that from biological sex, which is the full mature sexuality that we demonstrate as we mature sexually, okay? And I'm suggesting to you that genetically speaking, you're either a genetic male if you have the Y chromosome, and you're a genetic female if you do not have the Y chromosome. So, as you'll hear some people say, there are only two sexes, genetic males and genetic females. However, let's talk about this in a little more complex manner. Biological sex, on the other hand, is the full sexuality that you demonstrate once you are matured. I'm going to talk briefly about a concept to help clarify for you this for you. We're talking about genotypes and phenotypes. Your genotype is the instructions, the blueprint for building a human being. Your genes, your karyotype, your 46 genes contain the blueprint for building a human being, building that human being's heart, building its lungs, building its male or female sex characteristics, building its head, its arms. Your genotype are the instructions that come on your genes. Did you know that your genotype contains about 25,000 genes, and all of these genes have a job to do? So genes create and regulate proteins. You, my friend, are made and controlled by the proteins and amino acids in your body. Did you know that these genes turn on and off at biologically determined times to create you and aspects of you? So at the age of 7 weeks of prenatal development, your SRY gene is turned on and it starts creating proteins and causing the little organism developing embryo to begin to turn into a male. So we have these 25 genes. They're in our genotype, these 25,000 genes. These genes are the plans that build every part of you, including your sexuality. On the other hand, your phenotype is what occurs as a result of these genetic instructions. So you have genetic instructions for eye color, but when you're born, what color do you have? Do you have blue eyes, green eyes, or brown eyes? The phenotype is the outward observable manifestation of your person's genome. Having a penis, having breasts, having a female or a male body shape, having armpit hair, these are manifestations of the genetic instructions for sexuality that come on your genes. Okay? So, your genetic sex is your genotype. As I suggested to you, it's either male or female. On the other hand, your biological sex represents your phenotype. This is what is created by the genes in your body. So your biological sex is the sex that is manifested as these genes turn on and off during the developmental process in the womb, creating your urinary tract, creating your ovaries, creating your prostate gland, creating the penis and the vagina, etc., etc. These are all things that develop as a result of the genetic instructions, and they create your mature sexuality. Now, if you look at the picture underneath me, you have what we think of as the prototypical male and female sexuality in adulthood. They're the mature human sexuality of male and females. These represent the typical direction of sexual maturation. So you have this SRY gene, or you don't have this SRY gene. You have this 23rd pair of chromosomes, and they basically create these biological features that we see down here. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to differentiate two things: your primary sex characteristics from your secondary sex characteristics. When we talk about these things, we say an organism's primary sex characteristics are those biological structures that are directly involved in reproduction. Your sex organs and your sex cells, your gametes, are your primary sex characteristics. So for the prototypical male, testes, a prostate gland, and the production of sperm are some of your primary characteristics. On the other hand, for the female, the sexual reproduction organs for the female are the uterus, the fallopian tubes, ovaries, and your gametes called egg cells. Those are the primary sex characteristics that define a female. Now, along with those, in those primary sex characteristics, many of them are sort of developed before you're born. The penis, the prostate, the ovaries, the testicles in the man. They're sort of created, developed before the baby is born. Now, what develops around the time of sexual maturity are the characteristics that allow males and females to sort of look different on the street. These secondary sex characteristics are characteristics that typically define a sexually mature person and help differentiate boys from girls, but these characteristics are not directly related to production. So, for example, in your males around puberty, we're going to get a deeper voice. We're going to start growing this peach fuzz on our chin, and we're going to get chest hair, as well as pubic hair and armpit hair. And boys' bodies are going to start to change. Our hips are going to narrow. Hopefully our chest and shoulders are going to broaden, and guys are going to get kind of that V-shaped look. On the other hand, around puberty, what you're going to see are your females are going to have some body changes. Some of these changes are similar to males. Some of them are different. So just like a male, your female is going to get armpit hair and pubic hair as secondary sex characteristics. However, fat's going to collect around the female's hips and on the female's breast and is going to give that female that prototypical hourglass shape. Right? And these are called the secondary female characteristics. So the genes are our genetic instructions. You either have that Y gene or the Y chromosome or you don't. You're either a genetic male or a genetic female. Now, as you're conceived and develop in the womb, these genes cause a cascade of hormonal and physical changes that build these primary sex characteristics and later on these secondary sex characteristics. All right, these characteristics that I'm talking about represent your biological sex. Now, what I will tell you is that in order for you to develop into the prototypical male or prototypical female, all of these genes have to express themselves at the proper time of development and create the proper biological structures and hormonal structures in order to cause these physical manifestations of sexuality to emerge. All right. Now, let's look at the important milestones of sexual differentiation. At about the around of age of 5 weeks of gestation after the baby is conceived, after the sperm and egg cell unite, the baby's going to begin to develop these little organs. Remember we talked about organogenesis in chapter 4, the development of the organs in the body occurs between 2 and 8 weeks. Well, around the 5th week, these gonads begin developing in the embryo. Now, these gonads are what we call bipotential. They're organs, and they can go one of two ways. These gonads can either turn into testicles and start producing testosterone, or they can turn into ovaries and begin producing another hormone, another group of hormones called estrogens. Okay, so at 5 weeks, the little embryo develops these little gonads. Now, what happens if you have the SRY gene? If you have the SRY gene and everything happens normally, at around the 7th week of gestation, these little gonads will begin to turn into testes. If you have the Y chromosome and the SRY gene on the Y chromosome, at around the 7th week of gestation, the SRY gene will cause these gonads to begin transforming into testes. On the other hand, if you do not have the SRY gene, these gonads will normally begin turning into ovaries. So in a sense, we all develop with the sort of male and female characteristics. And if we don't have this one particular gene, our characteristics will turn us into a female. If we do have these genes at the 7th week of development, our genes will turn our biological development into another direction. So that happens at the 7th week of gestation. Okay, now at the 8th week of gestation, these little gonads that are now turning into testes or ovaries are going to start producing sex hormones. Testes are going to create testosterone, which is and other androgens, the male hormones. And if the little developing baby has ovaries, those ovaries are going to begin producing estradiol and other estrogens. So testosterone tends to be, and androgens tend to be produced by testes, and ovaries are more produce more estrogen. Now it turns out that testes and ovaries both produce both sex hormones. Actually, testosterone levels are associated with sexual drive in both males and females. So both males and females produce male hormones and female hormones. But what's going to happen is that at puberty, these ovaries are going to go into an overdrive production of estrogen, and testes for the male are going to go in an overdrive production of testosterone. And it is the explosion of one of these two sex hormones in the body that begins to cause the secondary sex characteristics to develop. Look at this picture underneath me, and what you'll see are the levels of hormone production for males and females. And I'm actually going to ask about this on your homework and test. So what I want you to do is to look at the hormone production patterns that occur for males and females. Notice the two red lines represent female development. The red dashed line represents the testosterone levels produced by females. And the red solid line represents the estradiol, which is one of the estrogens that the body produces in women. And what you're going to see is that, yes, indeed, females do produce testosterone throughout their lifetime. But what's going to happen at around the age of 9 or 10, the estradiol levels of these females is going to shoot way up. It's going to increase, multiply 8 times around puberty. And so you'll see that solid red line peaks and goes straight up. And you'll notice females have these really high estrogen levels, estradiol levels, until around the age of 50. Does anybody know what happens to females around the age of 50? As I wait for your response here, somebody, of course, knows the answer, is going to show it off to me. But what you'll notice is that around 50, female estradiol levels are going to plummet severely. They're going to shoot straight down. They're going to drop down, almost like falling off a cliff. Now, you'll notice that the females produce testosterone and estradiol, but what happens during the sexual reproduction years is that the female is going to experience a significant increase, a steep increase in the sex hormone related to females, estradiol, and it's going to stay pretty level through most of the reproductive years, and then it's going to just drop steeply off at around 50. That's when 50 is when menopause happens for females, and they stop producing those sex cells. Now look at the pattern for males. Males, the dashed blue line represents estradiol levels in males, and the solid blue line represents testosterone levels in males. Now what you're going to see from this is that males do produce estradiol. They do produce the female sex hormone. But what's going to happen again around the age of 9 or 10, puberty, in boys, their testosterone production is going to skyrocket, just like the female's production of estradiol skyrockets around age 10. And this increasing testosterone level is going to cause the cascade of secondary male characteristics that we typically associate with being a man. And you're going to notice that for men, their testosterone level pattern is different from females throughout adulthood. So what you're going to see is that males' testosterone level is going to peak in their early 20s, and then it's going to slowly taper off throughout the lifespan. It's not going to show that steep drop in the 50s that females' sex hormones do for females, but instead it's going to gradually taper off throughout the lifespan right here. Now, this puberty, these hormones, sex hormones, are incredibly important in causing the maturation of the primary sex characteristics and the secondary sex characteristics in males and females. Now, here's where we get the difference between genetics and biology. Your genetics are the instructions for how your body's supposed to produce and use testosterone or estrogen. And that's either a 1 or a 0. Either you get the male instructions or the female instructions. Whether or not that testosterone is produced in enough, in high enough amounts, whether or not that estrogen is produced in high enough amounts, whether or not your body actually is able to use the testosterone or estrogen. These kinds of things can change and vary. How the timing of the unfolding of these primary sex characteristics can change or be a little bit different or show flexibility. So all of the biological changes that are instructed by your genes don't necessarily happen perfectly in a 1-0 type of fashion. So sometimes what you're going to find is that males and females, some genetic males or some genetic females, are going to have characteristics of both sexes, the mature biological characteristics of both sexes. Now, these people are still genetic males or genetic females, but in terms of their mature sexual expression, what you're going to get are variations that occur. So, is biological sex as simple as a genetic sex? Not really. Genetic variations combined with a long, complex process of sexual differentiation virtually guarantees that there will be variations in sexual differentiation. So, just as we all differ in skin color or body shape or height, or there are variations and different things that can happen in these other physical characteristics, same thing can happen in the biological characteristics of sex. And so if you look at this chart down on the bottom, instead of thinking of biological sex as either being 1-0, either male or female, what I want you to understand is that males and females can actually differ and have characteristics that sort of put them somewhere in the middle of both of those categories. People who have both male and female primary or secondary sexual characteristics are sometimes referred to as people who are intersex. Now, like I said, some people in this society will say intersex can't exist. You're either genetically male or genetically female. Those people are right. You are either genetically male or genetically female. They are right. On the other hand, some people say intersex people really do exist. You know what? Those people are right too, because sometimes during the maturation process, a human organism will have instructions that cause them to develop both male and female sex characteristics. This does happen. Now, what I'd like to do is but you know what? Nobody really knows the names or the labels for any of these conditions that lead people to have intersexual qualities. So what I wanted to do was take a quick moment to introduce you to some of the chromosomal and genetic variations that lead to people who don't fall clearly into the category of male or female in terms of biological sex. I don't know if you knew this, but there are lots of different variations. Not everybody is born with 46 chromosomes. Some people have 45 chromosomes. Some people have 47 chromosomes. I'll bet most of you folks have heard of Down syndrome. Anybody ever heard of Down syndrome? That's sometimes called trisomy 21 because these people actually have 3 chromosomes instead of 2 in the 21st pair. So people with Down syndrome will have 47 chromosomes. You know, and this is not the only condition where people have more or less than the typical 46 chromosomes. So some of your sex-related conditions are going to occur because of extra or missing chromosomes. Did you know this? Some genetic males actually are born with an extra X chromosome in the 23rd pair. Now, these people have the XXY chromosome pattern. Now, these are genetic males because they have the Y chromosome, you see. And what you're going to find is that these men grow up and basically, for all intents and purposes, will grow up as genetic men, but they will develop secondary sex characteristics. Sometimes you'll see they'll have sort of the growth of fat in the chest area that looks like breasts, or the hips might get a little bigger. These men may kind of be more feminine in their body shape. And you know what? A lot of these men, because this situation is so slight and doesn't have any real negative consequences, what you're going to find is that some men may not even find out that they have Klinefelter syndrome until they go to the doctor for fertility problems as adults. Okay, so Klinefelter syndrome is an extra X characteristic in a genetic male, and it leads to the development of these secondary sex characteristics and infertility in males. Now, some males actually have two Y chromosomes in the 23rd pair. They have what's known as XYY syndrome. They have an extra Y chromosome in the genetic male. Now, people used to believe because Y chromosomes were associated with males, and males produce testosterone, and testosterone is related to aggression. People used to think that men with an extra Y chromosome would be violent or aggressive. Actually, research has shown that men with XYY syndrome are no more aggressive than normal. They are, however, taller than average. So you might even have Klinefelter's or XYY syndrome your whole life and never even be aware of it because the symptoms are so slight. Now, sometimes a genetic female is born and is missing a chromosome. Instead of having 46 chromosomes, a female will have 45 chromosomes. She'll be missing a second sex chromosome. Now, because this second sex chromosome is the Y, you'll notice that this person with Turner syndrome has only an X chromosome. Since this baby does not have a Y chromosome, this is a genetic female. Okay? And so this genetic female will typically be really, really short. Anytime you see a woman, an adult woman who's in the 4'6" to 4'7" range, there's a good possibility that this woman has a Turner syndrome. Genetic females with Turner syndrome are usually abnormally short, and they also have fertility problems. Turns out you need two X chromosomes to avoid being infertile. It's that second X chromosome that really is important for the development of the ovaries in females. Now, here's the crazy thing. Because chromosomes split and they get back together with this process we call meiosis, right, during sexual reproduction, sometimes this little SRY gene will actually move off of the Y chromosome. Now, remember I told you that the SRY gene on the Y chromosome is what starts the change for those little gonads to come into testes. The SRY gene is almost always on the Y chromosome, but occasionally through translocation problems, this SRY gene during fertilization will switch to the X chromosome. Now, if this SRY gene switches from the Y to the X chromosome in a genetic male, X or Y, you have what's called Swyer syndrome. And what you're going to have is a genetic male that is born, that develops feminine secondary sex characteristics. On the other hand, sometimes you'll have a female with two X chromosomes, and during the meiosis process, a Y chromosome the SRY gene will come from an unused Y chromosome and attach itself to an X chromosome. And what you'll get is a genetic female who actually has the SRY gene for maleness. And what you're going to see is a genetic female who develops masculine secondary sex characteristics. So look at these people. They have a genetic sex. They're either genetic male or genetic female. What you're going to notice is that their fertility is going to be affected, and their development of secondary sex characteristics might not be consistent with their genetic instructions, right? Now, not only do we have chromosomal variations, but sometimes there are variations in how the sex hormones are expressed and work in our body. So the SRY gene just causes the gonad to turn into a testis and start producing testosterone. Whether or not this testosterone is produced in the right levels or the body can use this testosterone will also determine the final outcome of biological sexuality. You may or may not know this, but there are some genetic females whose bodies during pregnancy produce an overabundance of androgens, testosterone and other androgens. So you'll have a little female baby in the womb developing, and this little female baby is exposed to really high levels of androgens. What you're going to get is a baby that is born with congenital hyperplasia. This is a genetic female, and these genetic females are actually going to demonstrate both male and female primary sex characteristics. So they're actually going to have characteristics, physical characteristics of both a male and a female. Now, there are some genetic males whose bodies do not respond to the testosterone that is produced by their testes. And these babies will be genetic males who also show mixed primary sex characteristics. Okay? So, in a sense, what I want you to know from this chart is that there are people whose genetic instructions say one thing, but then their biological sex will demonstrate both male and female characteristics. These people are called intersex. I do want you to know that some of these people are genetic males or genetic females, and then I want you to know sort of what characteristics are associated with these different types of disorders. I'm going to have a matching item on your test for this, and I'm going to have all these different syndromes, and then I'm going to want you to tell me the blue. You're going to match the bold black titles with the blue descriptions. And I have two matching questions. One's on your homework and one's on your test. And so I'm going to ask you to be familiar with these chromosome and hormonal variations that lead to variations in biological sex. Okay. Now, let's go back. You know what? Actually, I'm going to get to that last. Is biological as simple as genetic sex? No. Okay. Sexual orientation. Now, what I want to differentiate in this class is the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. Okay. Sexual orientation relates to the enduring targets of your attraction. If you are attracted to people of the opposite sex, you have an enduring sexual attraction for people of the opposite sex, we might use the label heterosexual to describe you. If you have an enduring sexual attraction to members of the same sex, we may call you homosexual. You may accept the label homosexual. And if you have enduring sexual attractions to both male and female of this species, then you might accept the label bisexual. Your sexual orientation is the target of your sexual interest. Let's differentiate that from how you feel about yourself, right? Which is your belief. Am I a male or am I a female? Here's the thing. I can be a homosexual male and be attracted to other males, but still feel like I'm a male inside. I feel like I'm a male, I'm just attracted to other males. My feeling of myself as being a male or a female is called my gender identity. Now, you've probably heard of those people who don't identify as their gender. And people Again, people who like a more simplistic explanation of sexuality will make jokes about I identify, I identify. Here's the thing: what you don't understand is not only do these hormones affect these physical secondary sex characteristics, but these hormones actually affect the way our brain is organized and how we think about things. So, your gender identity is your feelings about whether or not you are a male or a female, and your sexuality is whether or not you find males or females, people of the same or opposite sex, sexually attractive. Don't confuse gender identity and sexuality. Two different things, okay? Let me go back. So, here's the deal. I don't know if you know this, but homosexuality has always been a very controversial topic. Well, actually, in all histories, in all cultures, in different times, there have been various hostilities towards people whose sexuality, sexual preferences don't fit in with the mainstream. If you would, I'd like to give you just some historical timeline for the treatment of homosexuals here in the United States. Did you know that in 1951, if you were homosexual, you were actually officially banned from holding a government job? Did you know that? Did you know that in 1952, when the first DSM came out, which is the handbook that describes all psychological disorders, it's the handbook that all clinical psychologists have to know inside and out in order to be clinical psychologists. Did you know that in 1952, being homosexual was listed as a form of a sociopathic personality? You were a sociopath if you were homosexual in 1952. Did you know that? Now, Illinois, being homosexual, the country, most of the states in the country had sodomy laws targeting homosexual behavior, making it illegal. Did you know in 1961, Illinois became the first state to actually decriminalize homosexuality? Before 1961, it was actually not only seen as an aberration, but it was seen as illegal to have a preference for members of the same sex. Now, in 1961, Illinois decriminalized it, but I want you to know that it was still considered sociopathic by APA, the American Psychological Association. Now, the crazy thing is, it took till 1973 for the APA to recategorize and reframe the idea of homosexuality and take it out of the handbook as a form of mental illness. It wasn't until 1973. And now, even then, attitudes still didn't change. And we may think of, oh my goodness, I have an incorrect date here, 1996, not 86. Bill Clinton was still the governor of Arkansas at this time. 1996, Bill Clinton, this liberal president from history, actually signed a bill, the Defense of Marriage Bill, that banned federal recognition of same-sex marriage. This was in 1996, man, right? And it took until 2003 before the U.S. Supreme Court made it federal, changed federal laws so that it wasn't you weren't breaking a federal law to be homosexual, right? And so American society, I don't know about other societies, I don't know where you come from, what country, but in America, we've had a really rough road accepting people whose sexuality doesn't fit into what we think as the prototypical sexuality. Now, here's some things. There are some people talk about homosexuality, and there are some notions that need dispelled for you. Being raised by homosexual parents does not increase your likelihood of being homosexual. Now, you're going to see that some children will demonstrate gender non-conforming behavior as a child, and you might think their parents are causing that, so your parents is leading that child to homosexuality. Nope. Now, you will see people who sometimes turn out to be homosexual will demonstrate gender non-conforming behavior as a child. I have a great uncle who is homosexual, and my dad tells them that They grew up together. And he said that my great uncle, even as a 3 and 4 year old, demonstrated gender non-conforming behavior, even before anybody had an idea. Cousin Pat demonstrated gender non-conforming behavior. Now, this doesn't, like I said, if your parents make you demonstrate gender non-conforming behavior, will that cause you to be homosexual? No. But we do typically see sort of, you may see hints of it early in childhood when the child engages in gender non-conforming behavior. Now, I do want you to know that homosexuality does appear to have a genetic link for both males and females. However, the genetic link is stronger for males than it is for females. And what you're going to find down here in the final notes is that actually females tend to show a little more sexual fluidity. They sort of can have variations in sexual preference. So homosexuality does appear to have a genetic link which is stronger for males. Now, we do know that exposure to hormones, prenatal exposure to hormones like androgens or estrogens, are associated with sexual preference. And so your book's going to suggest that babies, females that are brought up that have higher levels of androgens during prenatal development are more likely to develop as female homosexuals, right? Now, research has shown this really odd thing that mothers who have multiple boys, there's an increased likelihood that the second, third, or fourth boys will turn out to be homosexual. And so males with older brothers have a higher tendency to be gay. And they think that this might have something to do with the mom's immune system. Maybe the mom's immune system is triggered by the first set of hormones produced by the first baby, and that this immune reaction causes second and third babies maybe to have lower androgen levels and develop non-standard sexual preferences. Now, they have looked at hypothalamus and other brain structures, and what you're going to notice is that hypothalamus that there are hypothalamus differences between the sexes, males and females. Males' hypothalamus tend to be a little bit bigger, and so what you're going to see is that the male hypothalamus in homosexual males is going to be more shaped and look more like a female's than a male's. Although these size changes, these biological differences are small and a little bit subtle to see. Okay. Final notes. Not all people's sexual preference is limited to one sex. There is a sexual fluidity. Some people find both males and females sexually interesting. You're going to see females are going to be a little more sexually fluid than males, but there is sexual fluidity in many people. And it is better to think of sexual preference existing as a continuum rather than a category. Last thing, feeling your sex, gender identity, the thoughts and feelings that make up a person's sense of being male or female. I promise you, not only are your primary sex characteristics and your secondary sex characteristics affected by your hormone levels, but your thinking, the way you feel, is associated with hormone levels. And you've probably heard the terms of people called transgenders or androgynous, maybe less often genderqueer. And I remember a student referred to me as cisgender about 10 years ago, and I had no idea what that meant. And these are just labels we put onto people to describe those people whose gender identity doesn't necessarily, or people, how people's gender identity relates to their biological sex. Okay, so I'm a cisgender male. That means I'm a male and I feel like a male inside. Now, there are some people who are transgender. So they have a biological sex, male or female, but then their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs about themselves are not consistent. So they identify with the wrong, well, not the wrong sex, with a different sex. And so these people are sometimes referred to as transgender. Sometimes people don't feel their sex one way or the other, and sometimes people feel like they are both male and female inside. Now, there are people who make fun of this, people who don't think this exists, etc., etc. And that's how you that's on you to believe one way or another. But brain scans do show that the brain activity in transgender people tends to match the brain of their tends to match the brain of their preferred their gender belief and not their biological sex. Okay, you know what? That's all I really had to talk about today with gender and sexuality. Uh, I'm not a biological psychologist. I'm not a sex expert. I'm just an average guy who learned at some point that genes and biology and determining sexuality is not as simple a process as you might think. All right. Hopefully you learned something of interest today. We have lecture tomorrow morning. We're going to start on chapter 11 tomorrow morning. And have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.